Hey guys, I'm Mikey Microphone, and the microphone is a metaphor for the fact that you have something beautiful to say, but you need to make the arrangements so that you can be heard. Now, often those arrangements involve wrangling a lot of technology, and today I want to try to start to unpack my thinking about why it makes so much sense to use Apple technology. Now, I have often discussed Apple technology with friends and family. And often people say, like, oh, well, I don't need all that computing power to do what I do. So I've noticed, both in myself and occasionally in other people, that people don't usually teach themselves software. They usually wait for someone else to teach them how to do it. And I think this is a interesting part about this discussion of interfaces that is really interesting to me. Giving yourself a powerful piece of Apple technology, I believe, is a good way to increase your income, to increase your productivity, to increase your flexibility, and often to also increase the quality of your work. Now, what I have done for most of my career is web programming using Ruby, and that community makes it pretty easy to see some of the advantages of using Apple hardware. But for many people throughout a number of different industries, the Mac does a great job at letting you wear many hats. So wearing many hats, what does that mean? Well, if you have a business, you sometimes want to design your own flyers. Sometimes you want to edit photos, make logos, make audio materials, video, web, written stuff, and then there's also cases where you can do 3D technology, 3D printing or 3D modeling, and learning how to do those things does take a lot of work. So I feel kind of daunted even just talking about it. A lot of people wonder, like, should I use an iPad or a Mac? Is the iPad a replacement for a Mac? And what I think is that if you have enough imagination, then you can start to see how using both is actually the best answer for how to optimize your business. So learning how to use different interfaces takes a lot of energy, and sometimes switching back and forth between different interfaces can slow you down. There is an obvious sort of draw to want to use one interface for a long period of time, but the ongoing progress of computer interfaces make it clear that eventually you do have to level up to the next generation. And with that inevitability in mind, I'm starting to think that it makes more sense to step earlier into the process of having multiple fluencies. In my industry, people often have a preferred text editor or a code editor. The type of coding that I do is usually editing text. It's not using drop-down menus to manipulate your objects. So for that reason, there are a bunch of different options for which text editor to use. And I've always kind of used TextMate, which is the one that was most popular when I began in the industry. But over the years, there's been a lot of competitors that have become prevalent, most notably Sublime Text. And so when I think of the question of, like, starting a new team, starting a new group, like, which should I teach them, TextMate or Sublime? And I'm starting to think that the correct answer is both. Learning how to understand both, learning how to do context switching, you kind of make that extra investment up front in order to train your brain to have flexibility and fluency. And you also start to develop a sense of which tool is better for which jobs. You can take away the frustration of having to do a ton of copy and pasting if you have a tool that can serve that type of refactoring need for you. And you can kind of relax with the sense that you know your work is going to continue for many years. You don't need to finish everything all in a single day. And that's kind of, I think, an interesting thing to consider as Apple's interfaces start to eclipse each other. There are some controls on the phone, on the Mac, that are replacing old systems that we know pretty well. And so thinking about like the inevitable march of the thing forward, like thinking about what's the proper rhythm at which to retire an old thing and try something new, and what's the proper amount of overlap to use to experience both at the same time and make the transition as smooth as it needs to be. I think this is a really interesting topic now that we see that these things that we're doing with our technology are things that can unfold over a number of years. And so I hope this all makes sense that I'm drawing this together. I think that right now we're actually in kind of an interesting scenario in order to try to imagine how these theories may be correct or maybe kind of missing stuff. And so the thought experiment is getting an iPhone 8 so that you can have that for the 2 weeks before iPhone 10 is available. How would you make it worth it? How would you make that expense one that was more productive than the expense of it? And so what you're doing is basically you have 2 weeks to get $700 of value out of that phone. How would you do it? Well, one path you could take would be to focus on the novelty of the phone and to try to get noticed somehow based on the fact that you have this special phone. But another thing that you could do would be to try to leverage the camera and to try to make some really beautiful content using that extremely powerful and efficient camera. So if the camera can make really great content on the first try and you don't need to edit it and you can do it and upload it very quickly, then that is one way that you can try to efficiently leverage the technology. Another thing that you might think about is the audio capability that it has. If you were a musician and you wanted to show your music to somebody as a way of generating business, you could use the phone's onboard speakers to give them a sample of your music, and you could try to leverage the fact that the phone speakers sound better than any other phone, and that would help you impress them, and maybe you could get hired on that basis. So I think it's an interesting thought experiment to say, like, how could I earn more than $1,000 within just 2 weeks because I had access to this technology? And how can you challenge yourself to leverage the interfaces quickly to overcome the frustrations that go along with learning something new and even the bugginess of it, and to both fit into its flow and fit it into your flow, because I think both of those things are really crucial in their own way as a way of doing business in the modern technical environment.